In 1944, the war in the skies over Europe seemed already decided as endless waves of American and British bombers crossed into Germany every single day, darkening the horizon with steel and smoke while factories burned, cities collapsed and railways were torn apart beneath them, and the once feared German Luftwaffe now stood exhausted, broken and outnumbered, with its best pilots dead, its fuel reserves nearly gone, and its aircraft hopelessly outmatched as Allied crews began to believe the air war was finally won. Yet hidden far from the front lines at a remote and heavily guarded German airfield, a radical experiment was quietly taking shape, something so strange and dangerous that even Germany's own pilots feared it, something that did not rely on propellers or jet turbines but on raw, uncontrollable rocket power. And this machine carried a name that would soon haunt Allied pilots who survived their first encounter with it: the Messerschmitt Me 163 Komet, the world's first operational rocket-powered fighter aircraft design. Not to dogfight, not to escort, and not to survive long missions, but to climb faster and strike harder than anything that had ever flown before. When Allied intelligence first heard rumors of a rocket plane, they laughed, dismissing it as desperate propaganda because the idea seemed absurd. An aircraft with only 7 minutes of fuel, no landing wheels, and an engine so volatile it could explode from the smallest mistake sounded less like a weapon and more like a suicide experiment. But the laughter stopped the day Allied bomber crews saw it with their own eyes, as a silent blur of metal and flame tore through tight bomber formations at unbelievable speed, leaving stunned gunners unable to track it and pilots struggling to understand what had just passed them, because there was no engine sound, no warning, and no time to react, only a flash and then destruction as the Me 163 climbed almost vertically, reaching altitudes of 30,000 feet in under 3 minutes, something no Allied fighter could even attempt, as P-51 Mustangs, Spitfires and Thunderbolts were left far below, watching helplessly as the rocket plane disappeared into the clouds. And for many Allied pilots this first encounter was so shocking that some believed Germany had invented a manned missile, a weapon closer to science fiction than aviation reality, because the Me 163 did not behave like an airplane. It launched using a detachable trolley, igniting its rocket engine and shooting into the sky like a bullet, its acceleration crushing pilots into their seats as fuel burned violently behind them, pushing the aircraft to speeds exceeding 600 miles per hour, faster than anything flying at the time. And in those few terrifying minutes of powered flight, the Me 163 was nearly untouchable, streaking through bomber formations in a single deadly pass, firing its cannons and vanishing before escorts could respond. Yet this terrifying power came at a terrible cost, because the same rocket fuel that gave the Komet its speed was so unstable that pilots feared it more than enemy gun fire. A minor leak could dissolve metal, ignite instantly, or explode without warning, and many pilots died not in combat but during training, takeoff or landing, earning the aircraft its grim nickname among Luftwaffe crews, the flying coffin, because landing the Me 163 was often more dangerous than attacking Allied bombers, as the aircraft returned powerless once its fuel was exhausted, gliding silently back toward base with no second chance, no engine restart, and no wheels, relying only on a metal skid to scrape across the runway, often throwing pilots violently forward or causing catastrophic crashes and burns. And while Allied bomber crews lived in fear of the Komet's sudden attacks, German pilots lived in constant fear of their own machine, knowing that one small mistake could mean death even without enemy contact. Yet despite these dangers, when the Me 163 was in the air, it changed the psychological balance of the war, because Allied pilots who once felt untouchable now knew there was something faster, something unpredictable, something they could not outrun or outclimb. But like all revolutionary weapons, the Komet carried a fatal weakness, and the Allies soon learned to exploit it, because no matter how fast the rocket plane was, it could only fight for minutes, and once its fuel burned away it became helpless and vulnerable. And Allied fighter pilots adapted, developing new tactics, refusing to chase the rocket upward and instead circling patiently near German airfields, waiting for the inevitable moment when the Me 163 Me-163 would return gliding slowly with empty tanks unable to fight back, and many Komets were destroyed during this vulnerable phase, shot down not during their terrifying ascent but during their silent powerless descent. And although nearly 300 Me-163 aircraft were built, only a small number ever reached operational units and fewer still achieved confirmed victories, officially credited with just 16 Allied aircraft destroyed, a shocking result for a weapon so advanced, so dangerous, and so expensive. And by 1945 Germany's situation had completely collapsed. Fuel shortages, grounded aircraft pilots were scarce, and Allied forces closed in from all sides, and the Me-163 program ended not with triumph but with abandonment, its promise unrealized, its potential wasted by time, scarcity and desperation. Yet despite its failure to change the outcome of the war, the Me-163 left behind a legacy far greater than its combat record, because it proved that speed, altitude and raw power could redefine air combat, influencing post-war rocket research, Cold War missile development and the future of aerospace engineering itself, inspiring scientists, engineers and designers who would later push beyond the atmosphere into space. And in the end, the Messerschmitt Me-163 stands as one of history's most haunting contradictions, a machine that terrified its enemies, killed its own pilots and arrived too late to save the nation that created it, reminding the world that sometimes technology does not fail because it is flawed but because it is born before the world is ready to understand.